It was at the dinner table that the humiliation cut deepest. I sat down, like I had every night for years, waiting for the meal to be served. My son, his wife, and my granddaughter were already there. The table was set with nice porcelain plates, the ones I bought with my wife back when she was alive. We used them for birthdays, holidays, special occasions, and that night, my daughter-in-law put one in front of everyone, except me. For me, she slid over a scratched plastic plate, the same kind she used for the dog's food. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to say something. My son kept his head down. My granddaughter just stared at her rice, and I sat there, with that ugly plate in front of me, feeling my face burn. That's when I realized something wasn't right in my own house. Something darker was hiding behind that plastic plate, and what I discovered next changed everything. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from? I want to know the city you're in. Now, let me take you back to how all this really started. I'm an old man. I've seen a lot in life. I built this house with my own hands, brick by brick. I worked like a mule so my son would never miss a meal. I gave him the best education I could afford. When my wife passed, I thought at least I would still have family around me. I believed my son would care for me like I once cared for him. But people change. Or maybe they show who they really are only when money and comfort are on the line. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Small details, you know? The way my daughter-in-law sighed whenever I walked into the room, how she whispered with my son in the kitchen and suddenly stopped talking when I came close. Even the way she rearranged my things, pushing them to the back of shelves as if I didn't belong there. I tried to brush it off. I told myself, you're old, you're sensitive, don't take it so hard. But the night of the plastic plate, I couldn't fool myself anymore. That wasn't a mistake. That was a message. I remember picking up the fork, trying to eat like nothing was wrong, but I could feel her eyes on me. She wanted me to react, to make a scene. My son avoided looking at me. My granddaughter's hands trembled as she held her cup. I didn't say a word, not then. But inside, I made a promise. I was going to find out what was happening. That same night, after everyone had gone to bed, I went into the kitchen. I wanted water, but more than that, I wanted answers. I moved quietly, barefoot, not even turning on the lights. I heard her voice. My daughter-in-law was on the phone, whispering. At first, I thought it was gossip with a friend. But then I heard the words that froze me in place. Once we get rid of him, the house will finally be ours. I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Get rid of me, that's what she said. My hands shook. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away. I backed away, careful not to make a sound. My head was spinning. Was my son in on it? Did he know what she was planning? I couldn't believe it. That boy was the reason I worked every day of my life. The thought of him betraying me like that, it was too much. I barely slept a wink. The next morning, things carried on like nothing happened. She served breakfast with her usual fake smile. My son sat across from me, tired eyes, like he hadn't slept either. I studied his face, looking for clues. Was he guilty or just blind? My granddaughter tried to make small talk, but her mother shut her down with one look. That house was heavy with silence. Days went by, each one worse than the last. I started noticing more. The way she pushed my son to talk about nursing homes, how she complained about the cost of medicine, how she called me forgetful in front of neighbors, planting seeds that I was losing my mind. Every jab was small, but together they cut deep. I tried to talk to my son, but he brushed me off. Dad, you're overthinking. She doesn't mean it, but I knew. A man knows when he's not wanted. Then came the moment that changed everything. I wasn't feeling well one afternoon. Headache, dizziness. I went to the cupboard looking for aspirin. I moved some boxes around, trying to find the bottle. That's when I noticed a package shoved way in the back, hidden behind the cereal. An envelope, thick and sealed. At first, I thought it was just old bills, but something about the way it was tucked away told me it wasn't supposed to be found. I held it in my hands, my fingers trembling. I could feel the weight of it. Papers, important ones. My mind raced. What was she hiding? Why put it in the kitchen cupboard of all places? I didn't open it right then. I just stood there in that dim kitchen, listening to the sound of the refrigerator humming, the silence pressing down on me. I knew, deep in my bones, that whatever was inside would explain everything. I slipped the envelope under my shirt and walked back to my room. My heart was hammering like a drum. For the first time, I felt the fear of living under the same roof as that woman. But along with the fear came something else. Anger. Pure, burning anger. They thought I was weak. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought they could push me aside, feed me on a dog's plate, and steal what was mine. They were wrong. I sat on my bed, staring at the envelope, fighting with myself. Part of me wanted to tear it open right there. Another part whispered, "Wait, be smart. Watch first. Learn what you're up against." I tucked it away in my drawer, locked it, and promised myself I would be ready. That night, dinner was even colder. She put the plastic plate in front of me again, almost daring me to speak. I stayed quiet, but this time, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt something else. Power. Because now I had a piece of the puzzle. She didn't know that I knew, and that gave me the upper hand, even if just for a moment. I looked at my son across the table. He looked tired, broken, caught between two worlds. He didn't defend me, but he didn't join her either. That was worse in a way. Silence can hurt more than words. I wanted to shout at him, to shake him, and ask, "Whose side are you on?" But I didn't. I saved it. The plastic plate sat in front of me, full of food I no longer tasted. My granddaughter glanced at me, her eyes full of questions she didn't dare ask. I gave her a small smile, just enough to calm her. But inside, I was a storm. And then, just as I lifted my fork, I caught the daughter-in-law watching me from the corner of her eye. She wasn't just waiting for me to eat, she was waiting for me to break, to give up, to accept my place as nothing more than an old man in her way. But I had news for her. The game had only just begun, because what I found in that cupboard was going to change everything. I didn't sleep well that night, not after finding that envelope in the cupboard. I locked it in my drawer, but my mind kept turning over and over like a wheel stuck in the mud. I could almost hear my wife's voice telling me, "Be careful, don't trust so easily." She always had a sixth sense for people, and I ignored her more than once. Lying there in the dark, I wondered if she had been right about my daughter-in-law from the very beginning. Every sigh, every forced smile, every whisper behind my back. Suddenly, all of it had meaning. I kept thinking about those words I overheard. "Once we get rid of him, everything will be ours." My stomach twisted every time I repeated that sentence in my head. I felt anger, yes, but more than that, I felt a cold, growing fear. When you realize that the people who live under the same roof as you might be planning your downfall, sleep doesn't come easy. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I shaved, combed my hair, sat at the table like always. But the air in that house was heavy. My son looked tired, like he hadn't slept either, though I didn't know if it was guilt or just a bad night. My granddaughter sat quietly, her eyes darting between me and her mother. And my daughter-in-law, well, she was smiling too much, the kind of smile that hides teeth. She placed the plastic plate in front of me again, slow and deliberate. I picked it up without saying a word. She wanted a reaction, but I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Inside, I was boiling, but I kept my face calm. I had learned long ago that silence can be more powerful than shouting. Later that day, I decided to go for a walk. I needed air, space to think. I walked down the old streets I had known for years, but they felt different now. I wasn't just an old man taking a stroll. I was a man carrying a secret, trying to piece together a puzzle that could change everything. I ended up at the barber shop, a place where men like me gather to complain about life. My old friend Carl was there. He's retired now, used to be a lawyer, sharp as a knife even at his age. I didn't tell him everything, but I gave him enough. I said, "Suppose a man found some papers hidden in his own house, papers that weren't supposed to be seen. What would that mean?" He narrowed his eyes and said, "If someone's hiding documents, it's because they're worth something. Could be inheritance, property, money, whatever it is. It's power, and if it's hidden from you, then it's about you." His words hit me like a hammer. He leaned closer and whispered, "Don't act yet. Watch. Let them think you're blind. That's when you'll see the most." I came back home with those words stuck in my head, and that's exactly what I did. I pretended to nap in the living room. eyes closed but ears open. That's when I heard them, my son and his wife, fighting in the kitchen. His voice cracked as he shouted, "We can't just push him out. He's still my father." My heart leapt. For a moment I felt hope, but then her voice sliced through. "Then you choose, him or me." Silence followed, long and suffocating. I kept my eyes shut, my fists clenched, trying not to breathe too loud. It was like listening to my own execution being planned in the next room. That night, my head pounded, my chest hurt. I argued with my daughter-in-law about the way she treated me, and the argument escalated. My vision blurred, I lost my balance, and the next thing I knew I was in bed, drenched in sweat. When I opened my eyes, my granddaughter was sitting there. She leaned close and whispered, "Grandpa, Mom didn't want to call the ambulance. She said maybe it was better if you didn't wake up." Those words hit harder than any fall or sickness could. I grabbed her hand and felt it trembling. She was just a child, caught in a war she didn't ask for. But in her eyes, I saw the truth. When I was finally alone, I unlocked the drawer and pulled out the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were property papers, the kind that decide who owns what. And there, tucked among them, was a letter in my wife's handwriting. My throat closed as I unfolded it. Her words were simple, but they cut deep. "If you are reading this, it means you found what I was afraid of. Do not trust her. She only sees you as a bank. Protect what is yours." I pressed the letter to my chest and felt tears sting my eyes. She had seen it all before I did. She tried to warn me even from the grave. Now the picture was clear. My daughter-in-law wanted me gone because this house, the land, everything was still under my name. She must have known about the letter, maybe even tried to destroy it. But for some reason, she didn't. Maybe she thought hiding it was enough. But now I had it, and with it, proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. And most of all, proof that my wife had been right all along. From that moment, something in me changed. The fear didn't go away, but it made room for something stronger: determination. I wasn't just an old man waiting to die in his chair. I had fought wars in my own way, survived crises, buried people I loved, and built a family from nothing. And now they wanted to erase me like I was just a piece of old furniture. No, I wasn't going down quietly. I started paying closer attention. I noticed how my son avoided looking me in the eye, how his hands shook when she pressed him about nursing homes. I noticed how my granddaughter hesitated before repeating things her mother told her. And I noticed how my daughter-in-law, confident and sharp, always kept one step ahead, controlling every word, every gesture, every silence. She thought she was in charge, but she didn't know what I had in my drawer. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, she served me again with the plastic plate. This time, I looked at it differently. It wasn't humiliation anymore. It was her mistake. Every time she did it, she dug her own grave deeper. I picked it up, forced a smile, and ate in silence. My granddaughter watched me, puzzled. I gave her a wink, small enough so her mother wouldn't notice. She frowned, but I could see a spark of relief in her eyes. Maybe she realized I wasn't as powerless as I looked. The days turned into a game of masks. I pretended to be weak, forgetful, distracted. She pretended to be caring in front of neighbors, complaining about the burden of taking care of me when they weren't listening. My son drowned himself in work, avoiding the storm brewing in his own house. But I wasn't just waiting anymore. I was watching, memorizing, planning. And then came the night when everything shifted again. I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when I saw her slip into the living room with her phone. She didn't notice me. I stayed in the shadows and listened. Her voice was low, but clear enough. "He's not going to last much longer. I'll make sure of it. Then the house is ours." My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay quiet. She laughed softly, a sound that made my skin crawl. She ended the call and went back upstairs, never knowing I was there. I stood in the dark, gripping the edge of the wall, shaking with rage. Now there was no doubt. She wasn't just humiliating me. She was planning my end. I looked at the cupboard where I had found the envelope, and I knew that piece of paper wasn't just evidence. It was my weapon. When I went back to bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my son, about how blind he was, or maybe how scared. I thought about my granddaughter, trapped in this poison. And I thought about my wife, about the promise I made when we built this house, that it would always be a home, a place place of safety, never a battlefield. But that night, I accepted the truth. The war had already begun, and I was right in the middle of it. And that's when I made a decision. I wouldn't wait for her to strike. The time was coming when I would strike first. I had the documents, I had the letter, and now I had the words I overheard. All I needed was the right moment to tear her mask off in front of everyone. But before that moment came, something happened that I never expected. Something that shook the fragile balance of that house and forced everything into motion much sooner than I planned. Because the very next day, my granddaughter revealed a secret that broke my heart and changed everything. When my granddaughter told me that secret, everything inside me went cold. She was sitting on the edge of my bed, eyes wide, hands shaking, whispering words that no child should ever have to say. She confessed that her mother had made her lie to me more than once, had made her hide things, had told her that I was sick in the head and that one day I wouldn't be around anymore. The girl said it in such a scared voice that I could feel her fear crawling into my chest. That was the moment I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't protect her by staying quiet. Silence had kept me alive up to that point, but now silence was making her a prisoner too, and I couldn't let that happen. I hugged her and promised her that things would change, even if it cost me what little strength I had left. I decided it would end at the dinner table. The same place where it all began, the place where humiliation was served along with food. I spent the whole day preparing myself, pacing my room like a man waiting for battle. My wife's letter was tucked inside my pocket, the documents were locked and ready, and on my phone I had the recording of my daughter-in-law's call. I had replayed it 100 times, each word sharper than a knife. Once we get rid of him, everything will be ours. I didn't want revenge for myself anymore. I wanted to break her mask in front of everyone, so that even my son, blind and weak, would finally see the monster he had married. When the evening came, I sat at the table before anyone else. My hands were steady, though my heart pounded like a drum. My son walked in first, his eyes tired, shoulders heavy, like a man carrying a burden he didn't know how to drop. My granddaughter followed, quiet, avoiding her mother's gaze. And then she entered, my daughter-in-law, dressed neatly, hair tied back, lips curved into that smile she always wore when she wanted to play innocent. She moved around the table, serving food, talking lightly as if nothing had ever happened, until she reached me. Without hesitation, she placed the scratched plastic plate in front of me once again. It was her favorite little show of power. She smirked and said, "There you go." This time I didn't pick it up. I pushed it back slowly, the sound of plastic scraping the wood echoing louder than any shout. She froze for a second, then forced a laugh, saying, "What's wrong? You're too good for this plate now?" My son looked down, ashamed. My granddaughter stiffened, and I finally spoke. My voice was louder than I expected. Strong, the kind of voice I hadn't used in years. I said, "Enough." The room went still. The forks stopped. The breathing got heavier, and I pulled the envelope out of my pocket. I laid the documents on the table, unfolded my wife's letter, and began to read it aloud. My voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every line. My son's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he recognized her handwriting. The words cut through the silence. "Do not trust her. She only sees you as a bank. Protect what is yours." My daughter-in-law's face drained of color. She reached forward, trying to grab the paper, but I pulled it back and slammed my hand on the table. "Don't you dare touch this." She tried to recover, raising her voice, saying I was confused, that I was sick, that the letter was old nonsense. But then my granddaughter, with tears in her eyes, shouted, "It's true! I saw Mom hiding it. I heard her on the phone." My son turned to her, his face breaking apart, torn between believing his child and protecting his wife. The daughter-in-law screamed at the girl to shut up, but the truth was already out, and her mask was slipping faster than she could hold it. That's when I took out my phone. I pressed play, and her voice filled the room. Crystal clear, undeniable. "Once we get rid of him, everything will be ours." The sound of her own words echoed like a gunshot. My son's mouth dropped open, his hands shaking as he pointed at her and stammered, You planned this." She tried to twist it, saying it was a joke, a misunderstanding, but the desperation in her voice betrayed her. She knocked the plastic plate off the table, sending it crashing against the wall, and screamed, "You ruined everything." My son broke then. He shouted at her, his voice raw, accusing her of lying, of manipulating, of poisoning their family. She shouted back, dragging his secrets into the light, saying he was weak, spineless. Nothing without her. The fight exploded, years of hidden resentment spilling into the open. My granddaughter sobbed, begging them to stop, and I sat there, holding the documents, watching the house I built turn into a battlefield. The shouting got louder, until she lunged at me, eyes wild, hands reaching for the papers. My son grabbed her arm, holding her back, and for the first time I saw real anger in his face, anger directed at her, not me. He pushed her away and said, "It's over." But she didn't give up. She screamed that she wasn't leaving empty-handed, that she deserved everything after all she had done for this family. Her voice was venom, her body trembling with rage, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. That's when I gave the signal. My old friend Carl, the lawyer, had been waiting outside with 2 officers, ready in case things got out of control. The front door opened, and when she saw them step in, her face collapsed. She screamed, cursed, fought, but the officers held her as she kicked and shouted that she would make us pay. My son stood there in shock, his whole world crumbling, and my granddaughter clung to me, burying her face in my chest. The house went silent after they took her away, but it was a heavy silence, full of ashes after the fire. My son dropped into a chair, covering his face with his hands, whispering apologies over and over. I looked at him, at the boy I had raised into a man, and for the first time I didn't feel pity. I felt distance. He had betrayed me, maybe out of weakness, maybe out of fear, but betrayal all the same. I said, "Respect isn't begged for, it's given, and you let them take it away from me." He sobbed, but I didn't move. My granddaughter was still trembling, and I held her tighter, promising myself that she would never again be caught in that kind of poison. I stood up, looked at the broken plastic plate lying on the floor, and felt something strange. It wasn't victory, it wasn't revenge, it was emptiness mixed with relief. The fight was over, but the scars would stay. I walked out of the room with my granddaughter at my side, leaving my son to face the ruins of the life he had built with the wrong woman, and that's how it ended. Not with cheers or joy, but with silence, truth, and the shattered pieces of a plate that told the story of my humiliation and my fight. The villain paid dearly. The mask was ripped off, and I emerged colder, scarred, but stronger. Some battles don't leave winners, only survivors, and I survived. If you listened this far, I want you to leave a single word in the comments: resilience, because that's what it takes to endure, to face betrayal, to stand up when they want you down. And if you liked this story, press the screen and watch the next one, even more intense. I promise you won't be able to stop listening.